Hello, welcome to this Rhino tutorial, and we're going to be looking at drawing 2D curves and then modifying them. Okay, so let's look at drawing some basic lines and defining what they are. So if I pop this out here, these are my lines. Let's look at this first one. Just a simple line. I'm going to draw in top view, so double click on the tab to open up the top view. If I click once, click twice, that's the end of the command. Just to note, if I hit the space bar or the enter button, it starts the command again. So if you're doing a repetitive operation, hitting space bar gets the command going again. So those are individual lines. If I do the same command again and turn on grid snap, for instance, I can do this where the lines are touching the ends of one another, and that looks like a continuous line. But if I select it, you see it's only selecting the one object. They're not connected, they just happen to be adjacent to one another. I can get a connected line by using a polyline, which is the next one across, or is the default one. It's the one you'd use most. So I can do the same sort of thing, but now when I select it, the whole thing is selected. It's an open curve, it says so in the properties at the top there. That means that the ends aren't touching one another. We'll get into that later. And so it's seen as one object. There are some other ways of drawing curves in here. Control point curves. We'll look at the first two. Control points. If I click now, you'll notice that the line doesn't go through the points, but it sort of interpolates through the middle of them. I personally prefer the second one, drawing through points, which you see where I click the line goes through. So that creates a curve. The rule of thumb with using curves is the less points you can create when you're inputting the curve, the smoother the curve is going to be. Okay, I'm going to delete those off. Let's look at some snapping. So again, snapping, at the moment I've had grid snap turned on, and we've already discussed this where I can snap to, at the moment this is set to millimeters, I'm snapping to these millimeter crossing points here. Let's turn off grid snap. Up until now I've had this disabled. I'm going to turn all of these off and we'll go through them all individually. So at the moment I'm not snapping to anything. Let me draw an individual line, something like that. Okay, let's see what these snaps do. If I turn on end snap, I'm going to draw a line. Now I'm not getting anything until I get somewhere near that end, and then it jumps and snaps to the end. It'll be the same down there. So that ensures that my second line is going to be touching that first line's end point. If I turn on nearest instead, that's assuring that the line is going to be touching the line and there won't be any gaps, but it's not guaranteed to find that end. That's up to you to hover over. You might miss it, and being neat and tidy is the whole point of using snaps. So I'm going to turn that off. Midpoint, that allows me to find the midpoint of this line, which is there. I'm going to ignore center for now, we'll look at them in a minute. Intersection. So if I draw two lines which have a crossing point, and now if I turn on intersection, I can find that crossing point. Perpendicular, which means 90 degrees to. So if I came in from here, for instance, you'll see I'm not getting anything until I get to that 90 degree moment, which is perpendicular, which gives me a 90-degree corner. Very useful when you're doing rectilinear design. Okay, I'll turn that off. I'm going to turn on center now. So if I have a circle and I start drawing a line, when I get near to that circle, I'm essentially telling Rhino that I want to snap to the middle of it. If I go too near it, it's not finding it. It wants to know it's the center of that circle. So snap, and it'll get to that point there. Other ones with circles would be the quadrant. So a quadrant allows me to, let's turn off center so I don't get confused. Quadrant allows me to snap to the 0, 90, 180 or 270 of that circle, so the quadrants of that circle. Okay, I'll turn that off. So I tend to leave the same snaps turned on for most of the time, and then I'll turn on my circle snaps when I need them. So the ones I have turned on are end, nearest, midpoint, intersection and perpendicular. I find those are the most useful ones. If you turn them all on, your cursor starts jumping around a little too much because it's finding every snap point on every object. There is the next option here called planar, and let's have a look at that. I'm going to jump to my 4 views so we can do this. If I was to draw a line, say from, well, let's do it in this top view. If I'm drawing in this top view, I'm drawing on that floor because I'm drawing on that working plane. That's considered to be a plane. Think of it like a piece of paper that you're drawing on. If I was to draw in the side, you'll notice in the 3D view that I've drawn vertically. If I draw, say, from a point here, if I actually define this as 0 in the 3D and then jump over to this one, holding my shift allows me to draw vertically. We'll get onto that in a little minute. But the point being is, with planar turned on now, no, I'll do it with planar turned off, sorry, to start with. I'm going to try and draw a line that's here, and ideally I want it to be at that same height. But if I start drawing out and around, you'll notice that it's only that first point went to the top of that line, the rest went onto this plane. I'm going to undo that. Now turn on planar. Now, so I'm essentially defining what plane I want to draw on by the first click. And now if I did that same move, I'm drawing relative to that first click, you'll see. So that's what planar does. It takes a bit of getting used to, but it's a very useful tool. Let's select off all of that. I'm going to turn planar off. Let's look at orthogonal next. So orthogonal is quite nice and quick. If I start a line, I'm going to hit 0, enter to get it to go from the midpoint. So at the moment I can input any angle for the next click. If I hold shift, notice that this ortho comes on here. Now that means orthogonal, and that locks you to specific angles. Default is 90 degrees, but if you go into the settings you can make it any increment of degrees you like. So it's very useful for, say, doing mirror lines where you want to ensure that it's a vertical or horizontal line that you're mirroring around. You can just turn it on all of the time and that will lock it to the orthogonal without having to hold shift, but I don't use it that often. I don't use it often enough to bother turning it on permanently, so I just hold shift when I need to. Next one we're going to look at is smart tracks. So I'm going to draw a vertical line by holding my shift. If I want to draw another line which is the same distance away from that red line as this end here, I could draw a line across holding my shift and then start another line and then delete the one that I don't need. That would be one way of doing it. Or I can turn on smart tracks, which then allows me to, if I go somewhere near it and go nice and slow and then move away I'm getting this white line which says that that first click is going to be relative to that top of that line there. And I can do the same here, move away slowly, and then I get a perpendicular because I've got my perpendicular snap on. So I can emulate that first line with second line using smart tracks. I briefly showed you this already, but just to reiterate it, you can work in different viewports without coming out of the same command. If I want a line to start from 0, I can come in here, hit 0, and my line has started there. If I wanted it to be planar to the top view, I could start working in the top view. If I wanted it to be more of a vertical one, you'll see in the 3D view that I'm now going upwards. So the point being, you can start in one window and you don't have to finish the command to jump into a different window. Okay, next we're going to look at drawing and editing lines. So let's start simply. In top view, if I draw a line and I draw another line that crosses it, at the moment those two are separate lines, they don't know one another exists. We can do a variety of things, like we can split them. So split commands are on the standard tabs. You've got trimming and you've got splitting. Let's do split first. So if you're not sure what to do, select the objects to split. Let's split this line in half and then hit enter when I'm happy. Select the cutting object, that would be this line. Now I've got two halves of a line, so I've used a line to slice through. Okay, let's delete those off. Let's do a single line and a single line. Now let's try a modify, like moving. So a move command, it's this one here, or you can start typing MO for move. So you select the object to move. You can keep on selecting, or you press enter or space bar when you're happy with your selection. Now it asks you to pick it up from a point. Now that could be a point on the line. You could use snaps to be neat. So let's do that. It could be off the line, somewhere over here maybe, but let's stick to on the line. So let's grab the end. And it's asking where to move to. If you're not sure, again, just keep reading the command line. It explains everything. I'm going to use my snap to snap it to the end of that line. So I've done a basic move command. With gumball turned on, you can move using the gumball, but it's a little bit more difficult to snap to the ends of things and use your snap commands, so it's best to use the proper commands. I'm just undoing there. Okay, so we've got two individual lines. We could join them together using this command here. So start that, select objects to join, and as long as they are touching each other, so having used snaps we know that they are, I've selected both and hit enter. Two curves joined into one open curve. So now I select it and they're joined, so that's more like a polyline situation. So individual lines turned into a polyline. We can trim lines, so I'm just going to select and delete those two off. So I'm going to draw a line and another line, so two individual lines, and I'm going to use, instead of using split, we're going to use trim. So select the cutting object, so it's the other way round to split. You're selecting the cutting object first. Happy with that, so hit spacebar or enter. Object to trim. Now if I click here, I'll lose that part of the line. If I click here, I'll lose that part of the line. I'm just undoing to get them back again. So I'm using this to cut and this to trim back. I'm going to delete those off. Let's draw a rectangle. So at the moment when I select it, because I use the rectangle tool, all four lines are joined. If I select it though and hit explode, that does what it sounds like. It turns them into their individual lines. It's no longer an object. Next, let's do some of the modify commands. Let's make another square and then use the rotate command. It's down here, rotate. Let's stick to rotate 2D, which is the left click. What's the object to rotate? That object. Happy with my selection, spacebar or enter. Center of rotation. Now let's do a corner, and you'll see here it starts doing this. I could click randomly here, but I would prefer, and I would suggest, holding the shift to start with, which gives you that orthogonal angle there. And you can see that I could do it by eye, or I could type in, say, 45 degrees, and I'll get a 45-degree rotation. Okay, I'm going to delete that off. So we did a move command and draw a rectangle, and we'll do that again. Start typing move, select the object, pick it up, drop it. It's worth having a practice at that. Start the command, select the object, happy with my selection, hit the spacebar or enter, pick the object up and then drop it. So copy. Now this isn't Control C, Control V like you'd get here. It's copy and paste. Please don't use those. That takes the CAD out of the software and then back into it and uses the cache memory of the machine. Can crash the machine if you're copying a big object. So use this here, copy. So select the object to copy, happy with my selection, spacebar or enter, pick it up from a point, and I can now copy it multiple times. Or if I undo that, I'll do it again, select it, copy it, but this time I'm going to say at 100, 0, which will take it to 100 in the X and 0 in the Y, and my copy has got an exact distance to it this time. Notice I'm still in the copy command. I could now go at 0, 100. If I zoom out a bit, you'll see I've gone 100 upwards in the Y direction this time. Escape out of that. Let's delete those off, and we will draw a zigzag polyline, and we'll look at mirroring. So I tend to type mirror, or just start typing the word mirror. MIRR is enough. Select object to mirror, start point of mirror. Now we could just hit randomly here, so let's do that, and you'll notice that it's mirroring around that point. If we wanted it to be a vertical mirror, I could hold my shift, which turns on ortho, and click, left click to finish. So that creates a mirror. As I mentioned earlier, you want to be working around 0 if you can. So if I typed in that mirror command again, select the objects, that one there, happy with my selection, spacebar, start a mirror plane. If I hit 0, now I'm mirroring around the 0 axis, which is a good way of keeping it neat. One little point about mirroring: when you're designing, always keep an eye out for symmetry, because the good thing with CAD is you can build half and then mirror. So if there's a line of symmetry within what you're designing, try and find it and work around it. It saves you a lot of time. Okay, I'm going to delete those off. Let's draw a rectangle, square, and let's talk about scaling. So if you start typing the word scale, you'll notice here it says scale, scale 1D, scale 2D. Scale would be scale 3D. So if I do scale, select the object, give it a origin point. So where am I going to scale up from? Let's call it this corner here. a scale factor or reference point. Now a scale factor would be, if I wanted it twice as big, I'd type 2 and then hit enter. Or I might do a reference point by clicking on a part of the object there, and then that's given me twice as big. So that's scaling in 3D. If I start scale again, you'll notice scale in 1D, select the object, happy with that, give it a reference point. I'm only going to be scaling in that one direction. I can't go anywhere else. So scaling in 1D does that. If I do the same again, I'll go upwards, I'm only scaling in that direction. This actually works a little bit better as a demonstration if I show you this with a cube. So draw yourself a cube. So a quick little go over the gumball again. You see you've got these controls, but let's just stick to typing in scale for now. Scale 1D, select the object, pick a base point, and you can start pulling it to where you need it. Scale again, this time 2D, select the object, happy with that, origin point. It's going to ask for the first direction, but you see I'm now scaling in those two directions. Let's do some editing of curves. So let's start with a interpolated curve here. Let's do that. So if you select it, you've got a certain amount of control using gumball to manipulate it, but if you want to actually edit how this curve works, you've got these two options here. Control points gives you points on the curve itself to grab and pull. Select it again, and this time control points, you'll see I've got points away from the curve which affects the curvature of it rather than where it passes through. And between the two you can usually get your curve to where it needs to be. So let's have a look at gumball a little bit more closely. I really like gumball, I think it's a great feature, and if you get the hang of working with gumball, it means you can jump into other softwares. They've all got their own version of gumball usually, so as a methodology it's quite a nice method to get into. So let's have a quick play with gumball so we get an idea of it. I'm going to stick another cube in, but I'm just going to chuck that onto the shaded view to get rid of the pink. So let's have a look what gumball gives us. If you select an object, gumball can then rotate and orbit around the center of that selected object, which is very useful when you're navigating through a model. As you can see, you've got move bars. You can start moving, point it in a direction and type an amount, 50 in this case. So if I wanted it just to move 2 mil, I can just start moving it a little bit and type 2, and I'll only get a 2 mil move, which is quite nice. It's got scaling inbuilt as well, so we can be scaling in all planes. You've got these here which allow you to move in 2 planes at once. I prefer doing it in little increments like this rather than that. I find that goes wrong more often than it goes right. One further thing with the gumball command is if you select an object, before you start moving it, if you want to copy that object, hit Alt on the keyboard and hold it, then start moving it. You see a little plus sign, and that means you're copying the object, which again speeds things up and is very useful. Okay, so that's it for this video. Please find the next one. Thank you.